It's Friday night, you've just put the kids to bed, and you and your significant other are about to decide on what you want to watch on Netflix. You suggest Back to the Future. Your partner suggests Star Trek Beyond. They're a big fan of the Beastie Boys after all. But in the end, what both of you really want, after a hard day's work and child haranguing, is some easy watching. But what exactly is easy watching? And why do Back to the Future and Star Trek and films like them fit the bill? Another term often used to describe easy watching is escapism, a hot topic amongst cinephiles, cultural theorists, and social psychologists. To try and get to grips with escapism, whether it's helpful or destructive, whether it's a form of filmmaking we should accept or try and fight, I'd like to start by taking a look at a filmmaker who is widely considered one of its chief proponents.
There is a place for mass entertainment, but it shouldn't be confused with art or quality award-winning filmmaking.
Sometimes I think that statements like that are pretentious in themselves, because it sort of says that, you know, art is serious and art can't move you. Art can't be on a bicycle with E.T. and fly across the moon. That can't be art, you know, that because it takes your heart along with it through the sky and it makes you feel like a kid again.
In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, there was an upsurge in spectacular films which people would go and watch in droves. It was said that films like King Kong helped people to take a break from the hopelessness and despair around them. Later on in the 1950s, big studios like MGM released entertainment pieces, musicals, and with star power and elaborate set pieces, show business became the operative word. These stood in stark contrast to what were described as message pictures, often found in film noir, which aimed at posing challenging questions against social norms. Many of the films Spielberg has produced and directed still achieve the same key impact on its audience as the grand entertainment pieces of the past, something that is instrumental in escapist cinema. Action attention. It's described in the snappily titled article, Activity Engagement as Escape from Self, the Role of Self-Suppression and Self-Expansion. Action attention has three main sides to it. 1. Being so absorbed in your task to the degree where your attention towards other things is severely reduced, i.e., you're so engrossed in your Netflix film, you haven't even noticed the kids staring. 2. Being disconnected from what's going on inside of you, or compartmentalizing your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. So you may be tired, stressed, and have a loud personality, but this film is disconnecting you from those things. Or thirdly, because you're so engrossed in the film, you aren't spending time trying to understand what is going on inside of you, so you step outside of yourself, so to speak, and aren't scrutinizing your internal world. There is, of course, the grand debate as to whether escapism is healthy or not. Task absorption, temporary disassociation, and reduced self-evaluation are, in themselves, quite neutral. So what are some of the common criticisms against escapism? On a basic level, many people will insist that escapist films will promote a narrowing of worldviews and a considerable reduction in overall emotional and intellectual intelligence. Within the framework of consumer society, market research shows that if a film's value system appeals to the consumer because they share that film's ideology, it is easier to be more immersed in the film as it's more enjoyable. So, I will enjoy, let's say, Jurassic Park more because I have a core ideological agreement with the film. Getting eaten by dinosaurs sucks. This relationship between agreement and enjoyment could prove very problematic if the pre-existing ideologies are irrational or prejudiced. Another key concern is that on a psychological level, people can try to suppress their own anxieties, addictions, and overall hang-ups by ignoring them through escapist fare. Of course, escapist films like Steven Spielberg's have their proponents with very good arguments as well. None more than the director of Cat People, Jacques Tourneur.
Le cinéma est un échappement, escape, est un, je sais pas, pour que les gens oublient leurs empoisonnements. Moi, j'aime pas, personnellement, je trouve que c'est un tort de montrer trop de scènes, comment vivent les gens, qui mangent dans leur cuisine, qui prennent un petit déjeuner. Il faut faire des films où on s'échappe un peu. C'est ce que Disney a si bien compris. C'est l'enchantement. Nous cherchons tous ça. Parce que nous portons en nous beaucoup de notre tendre jeunesse. Les histoires de notre maman, les histoires de notre oncle et notre tante. Ça reste en nous, qu'on le veuille ou non.
Just hold that heavy thought, Peter!
Like Robin Williams as Peter Pan in Hook, fans of escapist films will often promote the need for childlike wonder and enjoyment of stories. Having the opportunity to engage with a life-affirming film can take you out of the troubles and quagmire of your tired evening and give you a strength you didn't know you had. Jeremy Sherman, adjunct professor in rhetoric and language at the University of San Francisco, calls this face-it strategies such as meditation and exercise. The rest and fun afforded through picking a easy watching film on Netflix can constructively help with personal social pressures. This was identified as one of the 15 categories as to why people engage with leisure in the first place. Now, I've addressed some of the common points when discussing escapism, but you can't really talk about what escapism is and isn't without talking about the idea of high and lowbrow art. This distinction is a notion that Herbert J. Gans addressed in his book Popular Culture and High Culture, an analysis of evaluation of taste, and he called this distinction an aesthetic pluralism. Gans recognized the discussion on what was considered highbrow, sophisticated, intellectual, thought-provoking, and what was lowbrow, ordinary, everyman, pulp, spectacle for the lowest common denominator, as fundamentally a question of education and class. All the key ingredients of escapist films are associated with traditionally what would be considered the values of lower middle classes. The form of the film must serve the substance. Can I please have a nice clean 3-act structure? The culture's own ideas and feelings should be reinforced in a film, whilst doubts usually need to be resolved at the conclusion of it. Heroes are ordinary or extraordinary with traditional values. Performers rather than writers and directors are the priority, and what your friends and celebrity personalities think about a film is more important than critics. Therefore, Gans's point is that to label these films as escapist is not merely based on scientific evidence or empirical definitions of art, but on a class-based bias. It doesn't necessarily discredit one view or the other, but it's important to be aware of that bias when discussing the points. Points that echo Austrian author Michael Haneke's opinion on Spielberg, using what he describes as melodrama to address the Holocaust in Schindler's List.
Die Frage der Verantwortung ist nicht nur eine Frage einer Verantwortung vis-à-vis dem Thema, das man behandelt, sondern es ist immer in erster Linie eine Verantwortung gegenüber dem Zuschauer. Wie weit gebe ich dem Zuschauer die Möglichkeit, selbstständig zu sein und nicht manipuliert zu sein? Es ist immer eine Frage, die Verantwortung ist immer eine Frage der Manipulation. Wie ernst nehme ich den Zuschauer als Subjekt? Wie viel Chance gebe ich ihm, selber an einer Kommunikation mit dem Werk beteiligt zu sein? Wie sehr gebe ich nur sozusagen meine Meinung wieder und versuche, ihm meine Meinung aufzudrücken? Oder wie sehr nehme ich ihn ernst und gebe ihm die Chance, selber eine Meinung zu bilden?
So, the question still remains, who is right? The critics of escapism or its proponents? Well, maybe both. In his 1947 essay on fairy stories, J.R.R. Tolkien, author of The Lord of the Rings, discussed why people took issue with escapism in the context of enjoying fairy tales. It was because they often saw the escapist as a fleeing deserter, someone who is abandoning their moral, social, and cultural responsibilities, someone who is blinding themselves to the realities of life to their own detriment and to those around them. Tolkien, on the other hand, suggested that the escapist can also be thought of as an escaping prisoner. that by entering what he called a secondary world, the escapist can find a freedom to deal with life's problems and learn. Someone, in Tolkien's words, might rouse men to pull down the street lamps. Now, Tolkien did set these two things up as oppositions, one helpful and one unhelpful way to think of escapism. But this can also be seen as a scale. And this brings us back to that title that rolls off the tongue. Activity engagement as escape from self, the role of self-suppression and self-expansion. In this article, the three authors, Stenseg, Kraft and Rise, offer a scale of escapism and ranging from self-suppression to self-expansion, with drug abuse on one end and the flow state on the other. Now, if you don't know anything about the flow state, can I recommend that you have a look at the Nerdwriter's video called Flow, Happiness in Superfocus. I think you can also place Tolkien's freed prisoner and deserter on either end of the scale. In their article, Stenseg, Kraft and Rise suggests that the key difference between when activity sits in a person's engagement with escapism is their motivation, with prevention motives sitting with the deserter and promotion motives sitting with the freed prisoner. Now, promotion motives are about engaging in an activity so that it will help you achieve a goal, or in the article's words, towards nurturance of the self. While with prevention motives, the goals and obligations a person has become secondary to the desire to avoid negative outcomes, in order to protect the self from threats. So it's one thing to watch escapist films in order to rest so that tomorrow you can achieve the things you set out to do. It's another thing entirely to watch escapist films in order to avoid new ideas that may challenge and threaten existing ones. It would seem in a discussion on class, human psychology, and culture, one of the key factors that dictates whether our engagement with films is healthy or not are our motives. Psychologists seem to agree that there are specific activities, and by extensions films, that sit differently on the deserter-prisoner scale, based on its message, style, and production methods, and our motives. But certainly not solely based on whether it's fun, escapist, or not. So what will it be, guys? Back to the Future or Star Trek Beyond?